Buckle up. This is guaranteed to be a wild ride. Welcome to Musicians and Beyond special multi-part series, Under the Covers with Ernie Cefalu. This is your host, John Sarabian, with co-host Mark Lawhorn, and we are going to expose the history-making journey of this iconic figure and his contribution to the music and corporate world. Mark, part one with Ernie was awesome.
It certainly is. And for the audience at home, I'm Mark. That's John. We're talking with Ernie Cefalu,
That's me.
all the way from California. Hey, Ernie.
Hey.
And, you know, when we look back at part one, it's the important thing to take from that is laying the foundation with his early childhood influences, what his parents meant to him, what it meant to, you know, impress them and show them that he knew where he was going and that he knew what he was doing. And it led him to where his heart belonged and where his talent belonged.
Unbelievable. He's got a fantastic story. He's a great storyteller.
So easy to sit here and do an interview when you really don't have to say much.
That's right. So I think without further ado, Mark, I think we should start part two with Ernie Cefalu.
Here we go.
Ernie, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the wonderful words. You know, I'm glad that you enjoyed what we talked about. It could get pretty boring. You know, I don't want my life, but my life has been nothing less than amazing for me. And there was a few seconds, it's like depression. For me, I've been very blessed, and depression never has been a problem for me, even though rejection is always part of, that leads to that. I haven't had that many rejections in my life. It's more finding myself, and once I find myself and I get the confidence that I need, then the rejections seem to go away. And as we'll talk about in other episodes, I mean, there was times that instead of doing, we'd get an assignment and do 10 different things. And I'm at a point, and that 10 things would take maybe 3 or 4 days. Ideas and sketches and other artists getting in there and working, and we'd present this whole array. Over the last couple of years, it's been, I get an assignment, if I spend more than 5 minutes, it is amazing because the ideas come like that. And I guess that's what happens as you get older, as your career gets better or worse, or you get more and more secure in what you do and what you can deliver, the value you can bring to an assignment. It makes it so easy. Solutions, I've got plenty of solutions. I'm looking for problems, and the problem is never that much different than other problems. And I've got these solutions. Some I used, some are variations of that. Some weren't used, but didn't fit as good as they do now. It's kind of funny like that, how it's, it just kind of flows now. And it all started, way back when I was a kid, having those people, Sister Mary Lucidi, we talked about her. I'm sure she's still alive. She's got to be 900 by now, but she was such an amazing lady. And, for a nun, and a kid saying that about, having that love for a nun and no fear, is pretty amazing. And I've had people like that in my whole career, and probably one of the most important ones, and we'll talk about her. She's been a very big influence in my life and my career. We're going back to San Jose. I'm 18. I'm on a double date with my date and my best friend's girlfriend, and it's Bonnie. And we're in my 57 Chevy. And, and by now I'm starting art school. But my best friend and, Steve Eptimus is dating this girl. And when I remember pulling up in front of her house, and she came out with my friend and her father, who wanted to see who was in the car, right? And I looked at her, and at that moment, at that second, I knew that I fell in love with her, and I knew that I was going to spend the rest of my life with her. Okay. And she gets in the back seat. We go to the drive-in, and we're there, and I can't, everybody else watching the movie, I'm looking through the rearview mirror at her. So she's not looking at me. She's looking at the movie. She's looking at her boyfriend. And at a certain point during the intermission, my best friend, her date, and my date go to the concession stand. And this is the honest to God truth. I turn around and I looked at her and I said, you know what? You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. I'm absolutely in love with you. I want you to marry me. And she looked at me and she said, you know what? You're the biggest creep I've ever met in my whole life, hitting on your best friend's girlfriend. Wow. I turned around. I never said another word. They came back from the and I was like, please, God, I'll say 3 Hail Marys and an Our Father.
I
if
repent.
You just don't have her say anything to anybody, okay? And she didn't. But I never forgot about her. And for a couple of weeks, my friend would talk about her and I would not. And I couldn't get her out of my mind. And eventually, like within 2 weeks, they broke up. And it was like, all right, they broke up. But I can't ask him for her phone number. I don't remember where she lived. I wasn't paying that much attention. I can't ask him, and because he'd go, why do you want it? Well, because I fell in love with her. I don't think I can tell him that. But so anyway, we used to drag the main. Every weekend we would drag the main, every Friday night, Saturday night, and even hardcore on Sunday, up 10 blocks, over a block, down 10 blocks, over a block, up 10 blocks in San Jose on Main Street. And so I'll never forget it. I was there and with a friend, and we were in my 57 Chevy. Look over, and there she is with her girlfriend, Kathy. So we convinced him to pull over, and I talked to her. I got her phone number, and we made a date. Okay. And I forgot about the date. I don't know how, but I missed the date. And so I ended up showing up a day or so late, but she ended up putting up with me. And that'll be a whole nother story that we can get into, and the role that she played and why it happened, because it wouldn't have been for her. I would have never stayed in New York. I would have never created any of the stuff that I created. So what's the most influential, important part of my career? It's her. And we've been together now for 56 years. And every day is just a blessing, and we're best friends. We're lovers. She's my harshest critic, and she's my biggest fan, and I think that everyone having someone like that in their life is so critical. I look back, you never think about it while it's happening. You never really give it a lot of deep thought. It's just what's happening, and you have to either react or not react. With her, it was I had to react, and I did. And because of her, I was able to go on and do other stuff. And one of the things that we'll talk about this today is this was my first client. While I was looking for a job, I didn't know anybody in New York. I packed up a portfolio, a case that my father built, and I filled it with, it was beautiful, all dovetailed and stuff. He was a cabinet maker. He made this beautiful portfolio, weighed about 200 pounds. So I had to schlep it. And he had a handle on it, and it was cool, man. It was really cool. And I would go on these interviews, and I'd have all this work. And I had, the city of San Pablo was one of the things that I featured, and some of the Dixie stuff that I did, and some school projects. And before I went to New York, I stayed in college an extra year to build a portfolio, and I taught a watercolor class. Okay, because I really like watercolor, and they gave me a class to teach, and that was amazing. Because, like I said before, our campus looked like something out of prehistoric times with all these weird plants and stuff. And we'd go off, everybody be high, and we'd go off onto the campus and sit there drawing and painting. It was great. It was great teaching the class. But I was also building a portfolio, because I knew that if I was going to go to New York, I needed to build a portfolio. So I graduated. Spent that extra year. That at the end of the school year in June, I packed up my portfolio and went off to New York. And Bonnie, had already been now together 6 years. We were living together for the last couple of years in Oakland while I was in college. She was an accountant. She worked at Capwell's, a department store there. And I went to school full time and taught and built a portfolio. And so the deal with her was that she was going to stay there, and I was going to go to New York, and I was going to bring it to its knees because I was now the best. Okay. I graduated top of my class in advertising. I was on top of the world. My confidence, I had a wheelbarrow that I carried my cojones around in. I was so full of myself. And I knew that New York was just another thing that I had to conquer, and it would happen just like it did all the other times. I'd be the guy out of 2,000 people to win the city of San Pablo's logo. I'd be the guy. I'd go to New York. They'd fight over me. I would be carried out like a conquering hero, bring it to its knees, and bring Bonnie to New York, and we'd live happily ever after. It didn't happen like that at all. Not at all. And it was like and I had made appointments when I was building the portfolio in Oakland. I would reach out to agencies in Manhattan and introduce myself, make an appointment to see, a creative director or something and show them my work. And I had set up maybe half a dozen or so. And then I figured I'd, just cold call, show up. See what happened. Woody Allen said 80% of it's showing up. If you show up, you got a 80% chance of getting it. So I just, stupid me, I'd never really been out of San Jose, man. That was the biggest city, and in Oakland was probably a little bit bigger, but I never really been out of California, and I had no idea, of what I was in store for. New York was another place. Never really gave it a lot of thought. That's where all the ad agencies are. So how hard would it be for the greatest guy from California to get a job where everybody's in advertising? They're going to fight for me, So after almost 2 weeks of total rejection and kafah, I decided that it wasn't going to. I made a big mistake. I made a really big mistake. I didn't know anybody. I went there. I got a place in Brooklyn, on Court Street, State and Court, and used to think that I could get on any subway train going into Manhattan. And as long as I stayed on it long enough and it was pointed in the right direction, I would eventually get to where I needed to be. And man, I ended up in some weird places, man, weird Bowling Green and all these weird Harlem. It was kind of crazy. Me in Harlem with this 200-pound portfolio, it's like, are you kidding me? So anyway, I called her and I told her, I said, I've made a big mistake. And I'm going to come home. I'm going to book a flight. I'm going to come home, and I've already worked at Walter Landers. I know I could go back there. I know I could get a job, and there's a few agencies around. I could be a freelancer. We're near her folks lived in San Jose. Mine did in San Jose. All our friends were in Oakland. We had a great apartment there. And I said, I'm just going to, made a big mistake. And I wasn't really as great as I thought I was. I had to kind of admit that to her. And again, up to now, she had been 100%, for it. Yeah, go do it. I'll wait here. I'll hold down the fort. We'll go there. We'll live happily ever after. It's going to be awesome. And I had convinced her. I'd convinced myself. I convinced her. So I was a pretty good salesman on top of it. So anyway, she listened to my sobbing and self-pity. And she said to me, well, you can go ahead and come on back, but I'm not going to be here when you come back. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to be? Where are you going? Are you going to pick me up at the airport? How am I going to get home? And she said, no, you don't get it. I don't want to, right now, you're running away from adversity. I don't want to spend the rest of my life with somebody like that. Somebody that every time they face a brick wall, they're going to turn around and run the other way. I can't live like that. I can't live with anybody like that. And you got to be kidding. I'm not running away. I'm just, maybe I'll get a few chops and we'll try it again. And she said, no, you're running away. And running away is like lying. It becomes very easy. It's like cocaine, very easy. Once you get used to it, it's actually your friend. And you can really hide behind it as much as you need to, whether it's a lie or it's another line. It's an easy thing to happen, and I've never seen that side of you, and I'm not going to live with someone that's like that. Now I'm seeing a side of you that I never saw before, and I'm not going to live like that. And I couldn't believe it. Honest to God, guys.
So that's like it's tough love. It's tough love. She called you out on it.
Yeah, we had been together for 6 years.
And that really was a turning point in your life.
It was it was a kick in the cojones.
Yeah, it sucked really at the time, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened.
She's always been my best friend and my harshest critic. Okay? My biggest fan, the one that'll tear me apart. But I never really had that problem so much before. It was never like that. It was never a life-changing decision that I was making by going to New York. I had already convinced her that we were going to be the king and queen of Manhattan. No problem. Shouldn't be a problem at all. I mean, it shouldn't take more than a week, right? I mean, seriously. So when she said that, I hung up the phone. First of all, I couldn't. She said, I'm not going to be here. You're going to come back. I'm not going to be here. And she hung up the phone. I'm like, oh, man, I couldn't. And it was like a Thursday or close to a weekend. And I had one more appointment that following Monday. And I must have picked up the phone 10 times to call the airline. Okay, I can get back there and I can convince her. She loves me. And I can convince her that it was bigger than either one of us ever imagined, and insurmountable odds. And she would have done the same thing I did. I could move a little of the blame over to her, but yeah, exactly. The story deepens. And so I must have picked up the phone 10 times and then hung it back up. Actually dialed the number a couple times and hung up. And I said, okay, well, this is it. I mean, this is a turning point. Like you said, John, it's a turning point in my life and I could see, I mean, I didn't want to agree to it, but I could see that like lying, like drugs, running away is a very bad habit. And it's easy to get into. I had an Italian mother that was like living with Kojak. When I would come home in the evening, she would go through my clothes. She would go through the drawers. She had my room bugged, I'm sure. And when she'd ask me, what did you do last night? Well, John and I went to the drive-in theater. Oh, really? What'd you see? Oh, whatever. And then when John would call the next morning and I'm sleeping, she would go, how'd you like the theater? How'd you like the movie last night? What movie? Oh, okay, now I'm dead in the water. This is it. So I got really good at lying. Really good, and dialing all my friends into lying, knowing what the story was, because Kojak would drill them and me. And, so when I met Bonnie, she taught me that lying wasn't a good thing. Okay. It was, and I was already addicted. I was a major user. I would use lies left and right, and she wouldn't put up with it, and after 6 years, she got me through that. And now I'm showing her a side that she never expected. She changed my life. At that moment, I said, okay, I've got to go on this interview. I went on the interview, got the job. Is a poster, the first freelance job while I was looking for full-time work in Manhattan.
Just to give them a sort of a preview of what they're going to hear later on in the episode as you start to go along the line.
What this shows is the first freelance project I did, and then the first job I got with Carloni and Associates, a small agency in Lower Manhattan. Yeah. Their biggest client was International Paper Company. And International Paper Company gave them their national sales meeting for 500 people that would come to the Roosevelt Hotel for a 3-day event. And his task was to create a theme and all the graphics for it and produce it, pretty much. And what you're going to see is that's what you see there. And then it goes over to some of the teasers, the record label on the label. We're going to be talking about that. I did a label, and then the record label and how that led to the Jesus Christ Superstar album and my career going from Madison Avenue to off Madison Avenue with 100% focus on the music world.
Excellent.
And how Jesus Christ Superstar led to what you're seeing on the label of that record, which is the first use of the Rolling Stones lips that logo was created in 1971. So yeah, awesome. What we're going to talk about today is these pieces and how they affected me. So what you're seeing over here is the first project they had. It was for the first health food store, 1969, the first health food store in Brooklyn Heights. It was called Garden of Eden. The logo was for the first health food store in Brooklyn Heights called the Garden of Eden. And a copywriter that I had met while I was moving around in different agencies looking for that first gig, a kid named Ken Flint. We became friends. And he liked to get high and I liked to get high. And when I moved to New York, this is kind of weird. When I moved to New York, I was the editor of the school paper, right? For the one whole year. I created the school paper, produced it, Once a week, we produced it. There was a team of us that put it out, and it was a big drug fest in putting out this school paper. And the school bought me a typewriter, an electronic typewriter with the changeable balls for the fonts. This is 1969, 68, 69. So I sold that when I graduated and bought a pound of pot, and I smuggled it to New York with me because I didn't know anybody, and I wanted to make sure I had, party time. So Kenny and I made instant friends, and we lived next to each other. And he lived in Brooklyn Heights, and because this apartment that I had rented in Brooklyn Heights was on State and Court, and so we started partying together. And he was friends with these guys that started this health food store called the Garden of Eden. So he got me a project, and he wrote the copy for it, and I did the graphics in it. I'll send you the logo. You can't see it. It's pretty small down there. It's an apple with 2 bites out of it. And it was kind of like Apple Records, but different. And so he and I worked on that together. And after I did that, I did another piece called Jazz on Grass, which was a bunch of guys that I got involved with that were real revolutionaries because of the Jelly Roll Press that we talked about last time. These guys were kind of the Jelly Roll Press of the East Coast. And they were doing and they had this concert with like the Last Poets and all these different jazz groups. And I did the poster for that. And then I got a job. I went on an interview with Carloni and Associates to do, they had gotten this project from International Paper Company, and they didn't really have the kind of look and feel that they wanted. They wanted something very poppy, and Peter Max was a big influence for me. I loved the color. I loved the composition of what he did. And it was during the peace and love, it was synonymous with everything else we're doing in Oakland and San Francisco and the rock bands and the Fillmore East and Avalon Ballroom and, all the concerts that Country Joe McDonald and the Fish used to play on our college campus. We were a mile from Berkeley, and all that stuff was going on at the same time. So when I went to New York, I had that kind of look and feel from my work. And Carloni hired me to create a campaign and a theme for International Paper Company's national sales meeting, 500 people. So I came up with this idea of like a Rockettes kind of thing, singers, dancers, skits. We hired Skip Redwine, who wrote a lot of industrial music. We hired him. He wrote 10 songs about paper and stuff, and Ticonderoga Text, big hit. And we cut an album. We pressed an album, 500 copies, and I created it's an album, and I created an octagon album cover. And on the front, it was pieces of these women that were swimming that were on the top of the poster. And so I sort of created, and these other pieces that you see are teasers, mailers that went out to the 500 salespeople that were going to be attending this 3-day event at the Roosevelt Hotel. And so we did rehearsals, we had singers and dancers, and we cut this album. Skip wrote some great songs, and we put it out, and it was a huge hit. It was a really big hit. It won all these awards and hung in the Union Carbide building. Somehow International Paper Company was involved with Union Carbide. And so they had this whole showcase in their entrance to their building in Upper Manhattan, where the whole campaign, the posters, the teasers, Carloni Associates, a picture of me, and all this stuff hung in that building. Okay. So in that building was also a headhunter company, a placement company that placed artists in jobs. So I get this call from this guy, Jim, who is a headhunter and places artists in different positions in agencies. And I'm already working in this smaller agency, Carloni Associates, but it wasn't on Madison Avenue. It's on 37th Street near Lexington. I wanted to be on Madison Avenue because there is a prestige that goes with that. Madison Avenue, big thing, And so...
Or so you thought as a young kid?
As I thought, even as an adult, as I'm 20-something years old now. I think I'm 21, 22. And as an adult, for me, if I'm going to be successful in advertising, I got to be on Madison Avenue. That's anything less than that is not a success, okay? You got to work in one of the big agencies. That was the mindset. And so I get the call from this headhunter, And he's saying, love your stuff that you did for International Paper Company. There's an opportunity that I'd like you to send you on for a company that's on Madison Avenue, and they're looking for an album, a designer, a creative director, well, actually an art director at that moment. And I had barely been a designer. So it's like, for me, it was like being in the Army as a private, and then all of a sudden you're like a master sergeant, okay? And so you jump over all the other, corporals and first sergeants and all that, staff sergeants. And I'm now a master, the position is calling for a master sergeant. And so, but the most important thing that resonated with me was that it was on Madison Avenue. It was in the New York Life building on Madison Avenue. I agreed to go. I went on the interview. And again, like for Dolls Alive and other times in my career, it's all about timing. We've talked about this. Timing is more critical than anything. It's more critical than money, influence, talent, you name it. Nothing comes before timing. Timing is everything. And for me, the timing had seemed to be right. It's getting me on a path. Okay, now I can see the path I'm on. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm near Madison Avenue and I'm in an agency. And yeah, International Paper Company is their biggest client, but it didn't matter. I'm on my way. So it's funny because at the same time this guy called me to go on this interview, and I've never really said this before, but it's funny. But when he called me, I thought, because it was such a success, we went to a Christmas party. Okay, in 1969, 1970, went to a Christmas party, and there I'm like the hero of the party. I did a thing for International Paper Company that won awards. It was hanging in Union Carbide building. Mr. Carloni took me to the side and said, okay, Ernie, you did a great job here. I want to thank you so much. And I want you to meet with me Monday morning. Okay. And this was, I forget what day it was, but I ended up going on this interview. And it's so funny. We're talking about timing. When I went to this agency, it was on the 37th floor of the New York Life building facing uptown. And it was the whole front of the building was their agency. And it was kind of scary. It was kind of overwhelming. There were probably 50 people working there. And I was sitting waiting for the owner to show up for my meeting. And I'm watching this head of production having 3 heart attacks and 5 cups of coffee and 3 packs of cigarettes at a time. And, his job was to move the work through the agency. And I'm like, I don't know whether I really want to work here. This is really kind of like us. Where I am is small and everybody likes each other and I'm a hero. I'm Andy Hardy, It's great. They love me. And why would I want to leave that and go to this? So I'm watching all this stuff. The guy shows up. We have the interview. He's looking at all the Dolls Alive stuff that I did. And his name was Norman Levitt. He was an ex-Marine Corps Master Sergeant who had retired and started this agency. And he had Decca Records. He had ITT Levitt Pomcosi, he had Ralston Purina, had Omega watches, had wearing blenders and mixers. He had some pretty prestigious New York Life. He had some pretty prestigious accounts. And so he had a shaved head, and he looked at my portfolio. He looked at all the Dolls Alive stuff, and he said, he put his glasses up over on his forehead, and he said, I like your work. What are you looking for as far as the salary? Well, so by this time, I'm already convinced that there's no way I'm taking this job. I'm not working in this place. It's scary. It's not what I want yet. I'm not ready. Again, I'm not overestimated working on Madison Avenue, because if this is Madison and this is what it's about, I'd rather be off Madison in an agency where I'm a big fish in a little pond. So I told him $30,000 more than I was making at the other job. And he was like, well, he was taken back. And he thought about it for a minute. I'm like, fuck yeah, man, I pulled this one off. There's no way he's going to hire me for that much money, and he didn't tell me what it was about. He just asked what it was. And so I said, 30,000, I can't take less than that. I'm already making close to that. And I was close, 30,000 off, but I was close, and so it wasn't a complete lie. And he sat back and he said, well, it's more than we were looking to spend, but I want to thank you for coming and taking time to show me your work. And I'm like, I was very humbled. I was, I really want to work here, but I just can't take less than that. You're breaking my heart. But inside I'm elated. I'm like, yes, this is great. And so I was so happy. When I left the meeting, I took a cab home to Brooklyn instead of taking the F train. I took a cab because this is great. This is the best thing ever. And because I'm a hero over here, I don't have to work in this place that scared the hell out of me. And I'm very happy. I'm very complacent. At the same time that was happening, I had my meeting with Norman Levitt. But before I had the meeting with Norman Levitt, or actually, I think it was right after. No, it was before. I had a meeting with Carloni, the guy that owned the agency, and I had talked to Bonnie saying, okay, man, this is it. This is going to be great. I'm going to get a raise. I'm going to get all this stuff. I'm going to become an art director, and he fired me. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it because I was so sure that it was going to be great from here on in because of the Dolls Alive thing. And he fired me. He said, I know you're not going to understand this now, but this project that we have from International Paper, it's the biggest project I'll have all year from them. They're my biggest client. And I see that you would become very satisfied with just compromising your talent and taking this job and taking menial work, and you're much too talented for that. So you're not going to understand this now, but hopefully you'll realize one day that I'm doing it for you, because I could very easily keep you on. You'd be happy and you would be compromising your work. And he was absolutely right. So at that same time, I had gotten offered this job that I turned down. So it was like, oh my God. And on the way home, I'm thinking about all this stuff because I don't really have a job to go back to after 2 weeks, because he gave me a 2-week notice.
All because you asked for what you thought was too much.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking, okay, now I got to not only explain to Bonnie that, but why I didn't take a job for making a little bit more than I was making in a better stuff. And then how am I going to, she's already talking to the headhunter because he's calling her during the day while I'm at work, because I didn't want to go on another interview. I didn't want to be jumping from job to job, but I didn't know I was going to lose my job, and I didn't know I was going to get offered a job. So I'm like in this predicament, right? That halfway home across the Brooklyn Bridge, I'm thinking, what am I going to tell her? How am I going to, I don't lie anymore. So I got to have to come clean here. This is really, I'm screwed. Lying is much better. Chances of getting caught are much less, so I'm working it out. I go upstairs. We lived in Park Slope on the second floor. And I went up and before I could even ring the bell, she comes to the door and she says, Mr. Levitt called and he wants you to call him. And I'm like, oh, no, this is good because I don't have to explain to her right away. I can perfect my story. And I'm on the phone with him. So this is even better. This is going to be great. I had it and then I lost it, Bon, kind of thing. That's where I was going immediately. So I called Norman Levitt back and he said, I talked to my partner and we want to hire you. So I'm like, oh my God, 1 minute I'm in the toilet. And the next minute, I'm up on top again. How could this possibly be happening to me? Well, the timing was perfect. It's just so weird how it all worked out. And so he said, if you could come in on Saturday, I think it was like a Wednesday or Thursday that I met with him. And I knew I had 2 more weeks at Carloni so I could figure out a good story or get another job. And all of a sudden, this job that I didn't want comes along for more money than I was making. I think I was only making 25 grand a year. So I said 30. And so now I'm making 55 grand a year. And yeah, I don't know how bad it could be, So he asked if I could come in on Saturday and he could fill me in. And he really liked the fact that I had done that Dolls Alive album because he didn't tell me it was Decca Records. When I went to that Saturday, he was there and he started talking. He started telling me about how these 2 art directors that he had working on his account, Decca Records, had befriended the creative director there, a guy named Bill Levy, and had left his agency and was taking the Decca account with them. Okay. And he convinced a higher up to give them a chance to compete for the account. shootout. Okay. He did that not having anybody that could do the work. So again, timing was on my side because I was the guy that they needed at that moment. And it was either me or lose the DECA account. Now, he didn't tell me that straight out, but that's what it was. That was the situation. Okay. If he didn't have somebody to compete and there was really nobody, these two art directors had been working with DECA for about a year and they had become good friends. And I became good friends with Bill Levy after that as well. And he was a great guy, really taught me how to be a creative director and how to direct people and come up with ideas and make them meaningful in the record business. Because now the record business looked like it was going to be something that was going to bring in a lot of work. Okay, that was going to change my career because I'm going this way and all of a sudden it goes like that and like this. And so he tells me, that there's going to be a shootout. He said it's with DECA Records. We didn't know what the assignment was going to be, the competition was going to be. So we go to this Monday. He fills me in as much as he can. We go to a meeting at DECA Records on Monday in Bill Levy's office. And he comes in and he fills me and Norman in on this project. They've agreed to a shootout between your agency and these other guys' agency. The project is, we've got these two English guys that nobody had ever heard of, Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber. And they have this album called Jesus Christ Superstar that we're not really sure we want to really do because it's going to be really controversial. This is going to be really different than everybody knows, different than what the Bible says, different than what you've learned. This is a whole different way. This is a 70s way of looking, a hippie, if you will, way of looking at religion and what has been indoctrinated into us. So, he's filling us in on this. It was at that moment, it was a 3-album set, but because it was Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber and nobody had ever heard of them, they cut it to 2. And so it was a twin album. And he said, now that you've been briefed, when do you want to make a presentation? And I said, before Norman could say anything, I was like, sometimes my mouth is in gear before my brain is. So I said, well, when are the other guys making the presentation? I mean, Jesus Christ Superstar, how hard could that be? And he said, well, they've been briefed a week ago and they're going to be presenting a week from today, which was the following Monday. I just blurted out, I said, well, we'll make our presentation on Friday. And I looked over out of the corner of my eye and Norman was biting a major hole in his lip and his fists were clenched and he was not happy with what I had said. And on the cab ride home back to the agency from DECA Records, he didn't pull any punches. He really reamed me. He said, you made a commitment. This is an important client to me. It's been an important client for all these years, and you're giving yourself 4 days to come up with the biggest project that I've ever had at the most desperate time that I've ever had with this client, and you've just thrown it away in 4 days. And I said, oh, it felt right to me, and he said, yeah, I'm gambling a lot on you, and it's up to you now. And for 4 days, you'd have thought I had leprosy or something. Nobody came near me. Nobody talked to me. He was not, I would say, good morning, Norman. Good evening, Norman. Because I was there before anybody got there and I was there after everybody left. And they had put me in a corner all by myself. And so I did a lot of praying. I did a lot of soul searching. I visited 2 or 3 churches. And I came up with 5 different ideas, 2 of which I like better than the Angels. But when we made the presentation, Bill Levy fell in love with it. Norman saw it before we were leaving because the art department was prepping it, matting everything and putting the presentation in order. And I had given him all the sketches. And Norman saw it for the first time. He loved it. He shook his head. He smiled. And that's all he said. That's all he did. Smiled and shook his head. And I knew right then that he was happy with what I did. And I felt for sure we had at least 2, the Angels, and I had this other one that was like really cool with a big question mark in the middle. And it was all these Vietnam War and all these things that were going on, and the atom bomb, all this stuff in this stylized image that was circular, that was like the angels, you know? And I mean, the angels came to me because I remember my grandmother had a songbook, and there was all these angels and stuff. And I did one. And then I thought, I'm a very symmetrical designer. I love things that are symmetrical. You can sort of tell from it's what's on the left is on the right. There's a real comfort in that for me as a designer. To a circle, this is the perfect shape. It's got no beginning and no end. And I feel that same way about a lot of the stuff that I do. I'm not a fad chaser. I'm not a trendsetter. I design things that will look timeless. You can look at that Stone's Tongue. You can look at that Jesus Christ Superstar logo. You can look at the posters. You can look at the Garden of Eden logo that again, you'll have them so people can see them bigger. Very symmetrical, because there's a real comfort for me in that. When we made the presentation, Bill Levy fell down. I mean, he said, this is it. And the other agency made the presentation that following Monday. And I'll send you a piece that shows what I did and a piece what they presented. And what they presented was like this line drawing of a bearded guy that kind of looked like Moses. And it said superstar, because they were really pushing to not say Jesus Christ, because that was sacrilegious. And they fought desperately for that. And so, yeah, go ahead and you may convince Bill Levy, but now you got to go convince Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber to change the name of their musical. And that ain't going to happen, you know. So they were out of the contest altogether. Okay, so over the next 8 months, 7 months, more, maybe almost a year, I worked with Norman. I did a beautiful Aida, the opera. I did a beautiful package for that. I did a half a dozen other album covers with Bill Levy, and you know, he helped me become an art director and a creative director, and he helped me further my love for the music. I already loved the music from being a fan. Now I love the music because I'm a person that's creating branding. I've created Jesus Christ Superstar. I've created the Rolling Stones Tongue. Those are some of the biggest icons like in music history.
Now let me ask you, Ernie, when you
yeah, I'm like that. They get me all the time for touching buttons. I touch a button, everything's screwed. I get it, man.
I didn't know what this meant.
They tell me not to touch buttons. I don't touch buttons.
I'm trying to tell John, let it roll.
My hands are always above the keyboard. I don't touch any buttons. That's it, man. When they're not above the keyboard, they're folded.
So when you're faced with this, and you know the deadline's coming up, it's coming up quickly, you're into the shootout, you know that you're talking about someone that artistically has already taken a chance by creating this Jesus Christ Superstar title. So you know that you're playing into their hand. How does the other agency, other than just having a tie too tight around their neck, not know that you can play right into that?
Very interesting question. I've never been asked that, but I can tell you, I think it's because they came from an advertising background. There's a difference between doing advertising to the masses and doing artwork for music to the masses. It's even though that consumer of music is going to a grocery store to buy a product, it's the same guy, but it's two different mindsets.
Absolutely.
It's left brain, right brain.
Yeah.
And I think these guys were more into the advertising end, because I had seen some of the other covers they did. And at that time, album covers were the perfect album cover was a photograph of the artist or the group and their name in the top third. That was the perfect, because if it's set in the bin and you're going through the bin, you only see that top part. And we were breaking all the rules.
Yeah.
And as we got into Pacific Ioneer, and we're going to be talking about in upcoming episodes, we were what you would call trendsetters. We were breaking the rules. Today, you're considered disruptive.
Right.
I would say that my whole career has been disruptive. I don't go where most people would go. I do what my heart tells me to do, and I've been blessed enough times to be right, to where I've been able to build a career out of that. And the more the years go by, like we talked about earlier, now instead of taking days, I take minutes to come up with solutions. It's just like that. And I'll actually, if I make a major presentation, I feel guilty. So I'll do the first one, which is right back. Then I'll do 3 or 4 more just to make them know that there's some thinking that went into it. It wasn't, because that's one of the reasons why agencies charge so much money. They take so much time to do stuff, because if it really was sold the way it came up so quickly, they wouldn't be able to get the fees that they get. Right. I mean, I'm not unusual. I'm sure that everybody that does what I do, that's been in it as long as I've done it, has some success, feels the same way. It's just, there's only so many problems. There's only so many solutions for those problems. And it's a matter of having, I was once telling somebody, I have 2 or 3 big boxes of sketches that I did that were never bought. And I never threw them away, because I always thought, well, someday I'm not going to be able to slap my ass with both hands, and I'm going to need an idea. Okay. So I can bring down that box, because it says Ernie's idea is real big on the outside. So there's no guessing what it is. And I've got thousands. I can go through those boxes and I'll find a solution. It might have been for somebody else, but it's a solution.
But it's going to fit somewhere along the line. And you're going to think about that and say, oh my God, wait, I know exactly what we're going to use.
I know. Yeah. Now, there's only 3 boxes it could be in. Let's pull them all down and start going through them. And I may find something that I forgot all about that would even be better.
Right.
I never throw away an idea. Never. Ideas are like money in the bank. Okay. Because even if you don't know how to write a check or take it out, all you have to do is show them what you got, and they'll give you what you need.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I can do that. I'll always be able to do that. I'm 77. I've never been given a problem that I haven't been able to come up with a solution for. Now, whether the client likes it or not, that's a different story.
Right.
Okay. Because I've had clients that I present something to, and this is just great. I want to add yellow. No yellow. Well, why not? It needs to be. No. My wife doesn't like yellow. We can't do yellow. Oh, okay. And your wife had 1 semester of art in junior college. Okay, so we should. Meanwhile, millions of people love yellow, and yellow is what's needed. And you don't want to do it because your wife doesn't like yellow. So it's like, oh my God, really? Yeah. So I've been very, very blessed. I've been very, very lucky to be able to get solutions that are needed, that are relevant. It's all those years. And we'll talk about not only the music, the corporate, For me, variety is the spice of life. All I did every day was an album cover. I might as well go to work for General Motors, putting door handles on cars.
Right.
There's no creativity to that.
Let's just remind the audience at home, this is part 2 of a series covering the life, the work, and the journey that Ernie Cefalu has been on in the advertising world, in the album cover, artwork world. In so many ways, he's touched upon so many different things in this series, or this episode, or this part 2 of our series, that you got to be reminded that, he came from a small, humble beginning up in San Jose, California. His parents brought him up. He met a beautiful girl, Bonnie. He's touched on how she was the greatest influence in his life, and how that made sure that he stayed on track and stayed with his nose to the grindstone, working towards what he wanted. And we'll learn more about where that work goes to in part 3. So it's wonderful to hear the stories that you're telling us, Ernie, and it's awfully exciting to hear how the world of advertising works, and how you found a way to make it in a different realm, or in a different aspect of it than most people would normally go down. And
it's really funny because at 26, I started my own company, and I never really, I put up $2,500. My other 2 partners we all 3 work for the same company, vice president of sales and head of production, and the creative director. All 3 of us left that company. We each put in $2,500, and we started Pacific Ioneer, January 1, 1972. We opened our doors, and
for those that heard the teaser episode 28 leading up to this series, you may have heard Ernie talk about how that night came about and how they made that decision on I was going back and forth. The guy we worked for at the time wouldn't pay for an apartment for Bonnie and I, so she stayed in San Jose, and I would fly home on the weekends and be with her. And it's funny because we lived together for 6 years, and when we stayed at my parents' house, they wouldn't let us sleep together. It was so strange. But anyway, I brought back some incredible mescaline.
and from one of my friends in Oakland. And I decided that I was going to go to work for the competitor to the company that we work for, a company called AGI. It was a print firm out of Chicago that was selling board printing the same way Craig was. And I was going to go to work for them. They were whining and dining me. And that'll be a story that we talk about next week, because it's very interesting how all that happened, how Pacific Pioneer was led up to by not only these guys, but by Ivy Hill, one of the biggest printers in the business, and how they helped us and how it all came about. And we decided, and Tony was going to go back to New York. Lou was already in New York, and we had pretty much had to get rid of Lou because Lou couldn't make the transition from employee to employer. And it was just taking up too much time, and we were really working too hard. And so we bought him out. But I came back to LA with this mescaline, and Tony and I now had become really good friends from not liking each other at all. 3 months later, becoming good friends. And we decided, okay, I'm going to go off and work for AGI. They've been whining and dining me. He's going to go back to New York where all his connections were. And we were going to split up. Okay. And we had, in the interim, we had sold Big Bamboo to Lou Adler and Cheech and Chong, and we had sold Schools Out to Shep Gordon and Alice Cooper. So that furthered the bonding of he and I. And the mescaline, we decided on that mescaline trip that no matter who we went to work for, whether he went his way and I went my way, or we both went to work for somebody else, it was going to be the same ending. It was always going to be somebody else making the decision, somebody else treating the client like a friend as opposed to just money. And it wasn't how we wanted to do business. And so we took this mescaline, and halfway through the mescaline trip, we were both crying like babies and hugging and saying, this is we're brothers, man, and we need to do this together. We can do this. You've got the talent. Tony graduated college at 16. He was a genius. The CIA wined him and dined him for a couple of years and wanted him to go to work for them. He decided he wanted to be an advertiser. And he was a great salesman, and he was really good looking. He was 10 years older than I was. And believe me, we didn't like each other at all in New York. And because we were both fish put in the pond together, and we had to exist, we had to. And when I showed him the comps that I had done for Cheech and Chong and Alice Cooper, and he sold them, we knew. And it was just days later that we took the mescaline, and we knew that it was destined. We were destined to do something together. He had what I didn't have, and I had what he didn't have. And together it was like epoxy. Epoxy is really great. You can get the strongest epoxy, 2 pieces. Each one of them doesn't do anything. It's like nitro and glycerin. And we were nitro and glycerin, and all of a sudden Pacific Pioneer became the matches. And the rest was like, it was better than any LSD trip or mescaline trip I ever had, man. It was a high that was unbelievable.
We can't wait to hear what you have to say for episode 3 that's going to be up
and it's not always about drugs, but it was that moment. It was that sensitivity. It's like the Celestine prophecy.
It was needed at that moment.
That, that it's that moment when you're with somebody that's ready to receive, and you're giving, and you're ready to receive, and they're giving. It's that magic moment. The drugs were just
it was sort of a facilitator.
It was the car that got us there. And it became much more than that. We decided the name was going to be Pacific Pioneer because the Pacific Ocean, the eye for the art and the ear for the music. And our tagline was, our mothers always wanted us to be doctors.
I love it.
That's beautiful.
How it started.
And that, my friends at home, is how you start a business.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Ernie, again, thanks for sharing these stories. I mean, the world needs to know all these stories behind the story, and you truly are a history maker.
I thank you for that. I'm very humbled by you guys, willing to do this with me and with me, because it's not just about me; it's about all of us, and about we talked about it. I want to leave a mark, and because of people like yourself and Joyce Conway and some of the other people in my life, I'm going to be able to leave that mark behind, and it'll always be there. As long as people have eyes and ears, they're going to see what I've done, and each generation is going to discover that music.
Well, you are a history maker. You are our friend, and you are one hell of a good storyteller. And
well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. We'll see you on episode 3.
See you on episode 3. Thank you for being our friend.
Thank you, Ernie.
All right. Thank you, guys.